All right, welcome back. So today's section is going to be on carbohydrates. So what we're doing is we're actually breaking down, as we move forward in the chemistry of life, the four major macromolecules of the body. Not just our body, but of most living things. The most living things are going to be using carbohydrates. You guys know them as pretty much like carbs. Those are things like sugars, right? There's going to be lipids. Lipids are going to be things that you commonly known as fats. Proteins are proteins. And nucleic acids is something that you have not heard before unless you've heard of DNA, which is this deoxyribonucleic acid, right? And so that's where the nucleic acids come into place. But these four in combination make us, as well as most living things. Again, I keep saying most, right? Because there's always an exception to the rule. But in some form of combination or another, we're going to be talking about these, but our section today will be simply carbohydrates. Okay? And I wanted to start with this first. First off, acknowledging that carbs is not the enemy. And why I bring this up is because there's been cyclical, when I mean cyclical, sorry, because some people may not know the word, it means that things run in cycles, so they kind of repeat themselves. And so what this is showing here is a book from, I think it was the 90s. And they've made all these diets, and they had a whole bunch of different diets, and there's always a different diet. All the diets have pros and cons to each one, but remember, the focus of a diet is really simple. It's like, how do you balance the amount of nutrition coming in with the necessary amounts for your health and whatever, right? So, for example, we all know that the average adult will have about 2,000. But if you're an elite athlete like Michael Phelps, he was getting anywhere between 14 and 12,000 calories. Only reason why I know that is when I was watching the Olympics, they were explaining his calorie load and how he manages his food. I was like, wow, that's a lot. People like The Rock, Kobe Bryant, I was studying their recipes, and they're anywhere between 6,000 and 8,000, right? The average teen is anywhere between 4 and 8,000. The reason why you are much higher than an average person is based on growth and development, right? So you got to remember, even though you may not eat as much as an adult, but for your body to scale ratio, these calories make sense because you have to still grow. Now, depending on your age, if you're a junior or a senior, you have that metabolism still going, but it eventually, over time, will begin to slow itself down towards reaching the point of 2,000 calories. But you got the point. All right. So, why I said carbs are not the enemy is because there's a few diets out there, and again, my job is not to tell you which one is good, which one's bad. I'm just telling you what they are. Because I've used many diets, and and each person gets to choose what's best for them, So for example, the Atkins diet, which was in the 90s, I believe, and then it became the South Beach diet, and then now I believe it's called keto diet. And they all have a similar thing in common. There's some different recipes and focal points, but the main thing is they all cut out carbs, okay? And so each one does work. But each one, again, has its pros and cons. And so if you know anything about dieting and you're on the keto, you know about ketosis and how you actually cut it out. For those who don't know, and hey, how does it work or not, I'll just give you a quick summary. Your body digests food in a certain pattern, and it uses them in a certain order. So, of course, you will use carbs first, because you guys know these are your sugars, right? So what happens? These guys are gone, these guys are used up. Then what it will do, it will look for any free-floating proteins. Now, it doesn't go over regular proteins because then it would digest your muscles and stuff like that. So it's looking for free-floating. There's never a lot, so this stage is really short. The third stage, which is the lipid breakdown, is going to be your fats, right? So this is why if you have a large amount of carbs in your diet, right, you have to break past all of these carbs, eat them all, use them in your kind of exercise or whatever athletic or daily routine things you're going to be doing. Then you break down the proteins, and then you work on fats. And this is why dieting and weight loss and all that usually is time consuming. It's not a rapid event. You don't lose like 10 pounds in a day, right? It's very, very unhealthy. So What keto diet is like is basically inducing a thing called ketosis, which in English you skip step 1. So what if you skip step 1, you go straight to the short step 2 and you start digesting fats at step 3. So again, each one has its pros and cons. You know, if you want to know what's best for you, go see your nutritionist or something like that, right? But I just wanted to explain the current situation. But what many of you didn't know is that I remember it in the 90s. Now, it probably was maybe even earlier that, I don't know, I can't remember back that far, but I remember the 90s, and I remember this diet was so popular that even McDonald's had an Atkins burger, which was pretty trippy. Anyway, moving on. So, let's talk about carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, well, actually, we're going to talk about all 4 of them first. As when we look at these 4 macromolecules, they're going to be in some sort of shape. They will be either in a monomer, which again, mono means 1, and poly means many. So a monomer means they're in a single, molecule. So a single molecule form versus a polymer, which is a group or, many molecules put together, right? So this is the shapes that they can be in. Carbohydrates, also known as sugars, can be in combinations of these, which I'm going to show you today. And we're also going to look at what is the function of each one in our bodies and how do they work. Okay, so first a little background. When we think about carbohydrates, we're thinking again about a macromolecule. The word macro means big from before, and molecule is just molecule. So these are very large molecules. Now I'm going to draw it ugly, but I have a good picture after. It is in the shape of a hexagon, which has 6 sides. These 6 sides are going to have little bonds on each one of these carbons here. You're going to notice there's an oxygen right here, and there's a carbon here. Okay, so this is what it looks like. It looks like a hexagon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides. Okay, now for our basic class, you don't have to know about this saccharide thing here. We won't be using that. That's more of an AP and IB kind of conversation. But they're there because you've probably seen them on your packages of like Doritos and stuff like that. All right. So, carbohydrates are our energy? Yes, but they're not the enemy. They're a major source of short-term energy, okay? So that's why when it says short-term energy, you get that sugar rush. Let's just pretend it was last year Halloween and you pounded down some candy. What happened? You got this big sugar rush. In about 30, 45 minutes, your sugar rush came down and you were over, right? So we're going to talk about that. That is actually called negative feedback, but I'll give you a short-term example of it after, okay? But let's talk about sugar because that's what we're here for in this section. Sugar has 2 purposes. The first purpose you all know. It stores energy. You know it's a source of energy. We all know this, right? You eat sugar, you get energy. What many of you do not know is that it's also structural, which means it builds stuff. For example, when you look at a tree outside and you see the tree, that's mostly sugar. It's just a different kind of sugar, the kind of sugar that you don't eat, that you don't digest, that is not palatable or good for you, but it's still a sugar. Okay, and so let's take a look at those sugars and how they affect us. Right. So this is one glucose molecule, which we know as a monomer, right? Because remember, it is just one molecule. So just like I drew before, it has 6 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-sided hexagon, right? And like I said, there's a carbon in every one of these little corners here. Okay, so this is just a monomer, even though it's made up of many atoms. But remember, it is a single molecule. When we want to look at in polymer form, these are the polymer form. What does that mean? Well, these are many of them, right? You can see this is one sugar, this is the second sugar, this is the third, this is the fourth, right? They all look the same. But if you really look at it closely, and for the sake of this class, you don't need to know the difference. And again, more advanced classes you do, but I wanted to show you why so you get a better understanding. Is that if you take a look, this one's upside down and this one's right side up. Like, how do you know? Well, take a look at this oxygen here, and you see the oxygen's on the bottom now. Then the oxygen's on the top, right? It flips upside down and right side up. This one, you're going to notice it's the same way all the way across, right? Starch is the whole way across. Cellulose is to build things that we build for a plant, right? Starch is going to be the plant's primary source of energy, right? Glycogen, this is animal energy. This is us. So we turn this starch into our sugar. Now, I know this picture doesn't really do justice because right now you're looking at them both and you're like, wait a second, they look the same. I got a better picture the next one, but this is nice because it's nice and big and I can show you some more cool things, particularly the cool thing of chitin. Chitin is cool for one primary reason. This is the exoskeleton of insects. Not just insects, but we have all arthropods, which includes spiders, insects, includes crustaceans such as crabs and lobsters. But check out the difference. The difference is this nitrogen. Now, this is only showing one nitrogen. It's actually a nitrogen group, but the picture is made for simplicity, right? But just adding that nitrogen group to a sugar changes all the properties of it to make it so solid that you think about it as like a cockroach shell or like the shell of a lobster, right? So let's take a look at that. So here, again, the potato has starch. This is the shape that starch would be looking at, right? It has this nice little pattern here, right? If you take a look at it, this is the source of energy for plants. This is us. We store our glycogen in our liver, okay? And if you take a look, these two patterns, remember earlier I said, hey, they look exactly the same, right? Let me erase this. These two look the same. You're like, wait a second, I'm confused. And I said, just hold on. Well, here it is. Take a look. Even though the glycogen and the starch have the same pattern, they're not organized the same. They're organized differently. And that simple change in organization changed it from plant energy to animal energy. Okay, now what about this one? Cellulose. Now it says algae, but this is pretty much most plants. This is to build, right? This is how they build their structure. And like I said, you can't really see, but there's like this little small little nitrogen here. You can't see it. Don't worry. It's on that past slide, right? But this is the exoskeleton of insects, arthropods, crustaceans, etc., right? So I wanted to share that, carbohydrates are not what we think. A lot of us think they're in a Snickers bar, which is true, but you can see they go far beyond that, right? You can see that a tree's structure, right? The insect, the cockroach, the ant, the wasp, all their exoskeletons are sugar too. And so this is why carbohydrates play such an important role. Right? And so I said earlier again, like plants store sugar in the form of starch and animals store it in the form of glycogen. So I did promise I'm going to give you a short preview of, and I got to use this slide because it has a nice little space on it, of diabetes. So now we talk about diabetes. When I say the word diabetes, you already come up with the word of insulin, right? So you're like, oh, okay, I know it is insulin and all that, but I like explaining it with like miles per hour. Now, these numbers are not the human numbers, but it's just easier for us to understand how our bodies work. So I'm just going to use miles per hour for now, so you get it a little easier. Now, our body has a speed limit of 45 miles per hour. Just like everyone in the world, including your parents and mine, we occasionally go over. Now, I'm going to go over a lot just because it's conversation, right? But this one, let's just say we went up to 60. Now your body notices this change, right? You notice. Your body doesn't like it that high. So this is like when you eat too much sugar and you got that sugar rush. What happens? Your body will reduce that speed back to what it's supposed to be. That's why I said it takes around 30-45 minutes. And then you get that sugar crash, right? You feel like you're coming down, you look a little tired because your body took away all that energy, okay? Now, just like the opposite, I'm going to go 15 under instead of 15 over. You could go slow too. This is like being stuck in traffic, right? You can go faster. You're supposed to be faster, but you just can't right now. And this happens if you don't eat. So for example, let's just say you didn't eat much today. You were studying all day, right? You're not going to die, but you're hungry. You're a little tired and all that. Well, you have stored energy. That's what happened here. This 60 was stored because you didn't need all that energy. So it was stored away in our liver, right? So what happens? Now you didn't eat all day. Your body needs to function. And you're like, wait, what do? I got to eat something. Well, all that energy you stored earlier will be taken back. So we're going to take out the reserves that we have, boosting this number back up to 45 again, keeping us at a nice area. Now, can you stay at 45 miles per hour? No, it always goes up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. It's kind of like that. Is you can't keep your foot on the gas exactly the same, right? I mean, you have cruise control, but even that goes up and down occasionally. But the point of the matter is that we try to maintain that balance, right? We try to get as close as we can. And that is a short glimpse of diabetes. Now, again, we're going to go much more in depth in our human anatomy class with the actual specific numbers. But for today's purpose of understanding sugars, I just wanted to use miles per hour. Okay, so that is our first section. Next section we're going to talk about is lipids. I'll see you then. Thank you.